Well, hello there, everybody, and a huge, huge welcome to this exciting webinar on a Tuesday afternoon. It's a joint webinar held by the Curious Piano Teachers and the Faber Music Teachers community. My name is Sally Cathcart, and I'm one of the directors of the Curious Piano Teachers. And I'm really delighted that we're hosting this webinar as part of our Stronger Together 10th birthday month. Yes, you've heard it right. The Curious Piano Teachers were formed in 2015 and we are 10 years old. So if you're joining us wherever, you'll see you've got a little chat button. It is a webinar, this is. So we'd love you to put in the chat where you're joining us from. Do stick it down there and say hello. You'll be able to ask questions during the webinar once I've handed over. So just put them in the chat, any questions that you've got, and we'll be picking those up at the end of Penelope's session. Because, of course, the reason you are all here is for the launch of Penelope Roskell's latest 2 books in her Essential Repertoire series. And we're going to hand over to Penelope in a minute, but first of all, I'd like to also introduce you to Claire Waters, I think that's right. And she is the team, the Faber community person. So Claire, welcome, and Penelope as well, huge welcome. I'm going to hand over to you, Claire, now.
Thank you, Sally. We're really excited to be jointly hosting this to celebrate the Curious Piano Teachers' 10th birthday. So my name is Claire and I run the Faber Music Teachers Community, which is a free online community for teachers with a Facebook group and email newsletters. And it's really just a space for teachers to talk to us as a publisher, access discounts, freebies, webinars, and find out about new resources, new education resources and publishing. So I'll drop a link to the chat if anyone wants to find out more about that. And then the exciting news about this webinar is that to help the Curious Piano Teachers celebrate their birthday, we're running a little prize draw. So I'll drop a link for this in the chat, but we've got a form. So you just need to pop your name and your email in the form and you'll be entered into a prize draw to win a free copy of each of the new books, Essential Piano Technique, levels 2 and 3. And this is going to close at the end of this session. So make sure you get your entry in soon. So I'll drop those links in the chat in just a moment. But I'm thrilled to be handing over to Penelope for this session. Penelope, as I'm sure you all know, is a renowned performer, teacher and writer. She's Professor of Piano at Trinity Laban and Chair of the European Piano Teachers Association in the UK. And she's a leading expert in the field of healthy piano technique and injury prevention. And her book, The Complete Pianist, is one of the most comprehensive books ever written on piano playing. And it's got lots of groundbreaking research on healthy playing and a whole body approach. So we're really excited to hear what she has to say today about her new levels in the Essential Piano Technique series. So over to you, Penelope.
Thank you very, very much, Claire and Sally, for that very kind introduction, and thank you for hosting this event today. I'm going to talk firstly a little bit about the rationale behind the whole series and the new books. I know some of you have heard me talk before and some of you are already using the first 3 books. So please just bear with me for the first few minutes while I talk about some general matters for those who aren't familiar with the books at all. Then I'm going to go into some really practical examples and show you some of the techniques from level 2 and level 3 and how we've developed them and how you can apply them in your teaching. And then I'll talk briefly about how you can use these books with your students. And then, as Sally said, please do add any questions in the chat. This is a series of 5 books now. Primer B and Level 1 came out 2 years ago. And they take students up to about grade 1 level in the UK exam system. That's sort of elementary level. The 2 new books are level 2 and level 3. Level 2 takes us to about grade 2 in the English system, and then level 3 takes us into intermediate playing, about to grade 4 level. So my aims here were to adapt the principles of healthy technique and of good piano playing that I'd expand in The Complete Pianist to students who were moving from elementary to intermediate level. So I wanted them to be able to create really strong technical foundations. For those who've already been working on the first 3 books, it will develop these foundations further, and this will avoid all sorts of problems later on, such as tension, musical problems, even pain and injuries. So in the first 3 books in particular, we really try to establish a good hand position, a well-coordinated hand and arm, and freedom and ease of movement all around the keyboard. So they weren't just stuck in the middle C area and only playing tunes in C major. So I always use a very broad approach to the concept of technique. I don't see it as just scales and arpeggios and finger exercises at all. So when I talk about technique, I'm talking about all the skills a pianist would use to play music really beautifully. So that might be about creating a beautiful sound or a beautiful balance of sounds. It may be about learning how to shape a phrase, to breathe between phrases. And so I'm going to show some of the techniques I'm going to be showing you today are a much broader approach to the idea of what technique involves. Of course, we're covering all the scales and arpeggios and all the traditional concepts. So what I use in the book is what I call musically focused technique. I think students are much more motivated if they understand the purpose for any technical exercise they're asked to do. So in the books, we start with a warm-up at the beginning of each section. Now, this warm-up is usually away from the piano. It might be standing up, and it's using very natural movements so that students get real freedom of movement. It feels natural. And before they try to put this into practice at the piano, because when students are at the piano, they're worried about notes, they're worried about reading, they're worried about playing the right notes. So they're less likely to have real freedom of movement. So then we transfer this onto the piano in some very short exercises using similar movements but focused on the piano. And then we lead that into a very short piece, many of which are composed by the composer Aaron Burroughs, who also wrote for the previous books, and other composers who are very well known that you will already be familiar with. So basically this is really serious technique, but that it's taught in a fun way. We use imagery, we use games, we use a little bit of humour so that it keeps students engaged and curious. So the musical examples that we use are very, very varied. And they're rich musically as well. They're not that sort of bland sort of music that sometimes we get in teaching pieces because we're trying to teach something simple. And they're very short so that students don't have to do a huge amount of note learning. They can learn them quickly, so they're really focusing on the technique and not getting distracted by, playing many, many pages of note learning. Each book also has an encore, which is a duet, and in which we use many of the techniques which were put into practice in the books themselves. So they bring this all together, and it's a real performance piece that they can play with a friend or with the teacher. There's a lot of flexibility, and I really encourage a flexible approach, and I see teachers are using these books already very flexibly. And so, for instance, because students are different ages, different learning styles. We have extension activities, so that if you're somebody who wants to use creative ideas, to extend things, to improvise, to develop, to modulate, these are all very much welcomed. And we include videos and some recommended related pieces. These are now put on the child's page, on the student page, rather than on the teacher page, because at this stage we're really recognizing that the student will be much more independent. We offer a lot of teacher support. There's revision for those students who haven't already been working on the previous books, and plenty of teaching tips for the teacher. So these are the 2 new books, Level 2 and Level 3. And as I said before, they will take a student from about grade 1 to about grade 4. So that's mid-intermediate level. So they're a little bit more geared to older learners. I would say We've taken out some of the more child-friendly words and images, for instance. We're really aiming for, I'd say, about grade 7, 8 to adult. There are more solo pieces than duets because the music is more satisfying. They can play more notes. It's more interesting, so they can have greater independence. And as I said, the videos and the suggested pieces are now on the student page. So, what techniques do we need at level 2? And actually, in many ways, when I was planning these books, I was really listening to what teachers need, and I was listening to what teachers in the Curious Piano Teachers group were saying they needed and what problems they'd had. So just as in the previous 3 books, we keep adding in warm-ups. We've got some hand strengthening exercises, particularly at this level, strengthening the 4th and 5th finger, which, as we know, tend to be very weak. We're bringing in quite a lot of rounded movements, so we're really wanting everything to be played very expressively. So we're showing expressive gestures, expressive scales, 1-octave arpeggios, and so on. And I'll give you some examples of how we develop that through the 2 books later on. We're really focusing a lot on listening, because I think we can expect a lot more of the students than sometimes we realise. We've got pages that are called sound explorers and dynamic explorers. It's ideal for a day when the student hasn't practised. You can just do some of these little exercises. They're exploring, if I make this movement, what does it sound like? How do I make a fortissimo? What do I do? So it's developing curiosity and interesting different qualities of sound. We talk about note endings. We talk about how to bring out a left-hand melody. We also cover rotation and Alberti bass and playing leaps, and introducing legato pedaling here with some examples for that, obviously. So then when we came to level 3, what I think a lot of teachers were saying is, they really needed help with agility, with introducing semiquavers, lightness of touch, being able to play these without feeling tense and anxious. So we've covered that in quite a lot of detail. Widely spaced chords, of course, at this level, we're coming away from the sort of just the closed hand position, moving out to 6/7 sevenths and octaves. And so students need to learn to be able to do that with a relaxed wrist and arm and a relaxed hand, and also between them to relax their hand. So this is a development of the parachute touch and the jellyfish touch, which we were teaching in the previous ones, but there's plenty of revision, so you'll be able to understand it if you've got a student who's starting at this level. We introduce 2-octave arpeggios. I leave these until level 3. I think sometimes they're introduced a little bit too early because they're a lot more difficult than some people realise. New scales, quite a lot of new scales, starting on the black notes and the melodic minor scale. We introduced the harmonic minor in level 2. Again, greater tone control, how to play pianissimo, which a lot of people are struggling with, and balancing the hands. So here we can, really play a left-hand melody and expect them to play it with a little bit more quality of sound in the left hand and a lighter right, for instance. And of course, one of the real challenges at this level is playing 2 voices in one hand. It could be just in thirds, or it could be in more contrapuntal writing. And then some of these fun things like accents and upbeats. By upbeats, I mean da-da-dum. So we're doing an upward movement, which gives an accent on the main beat. Repeated notes, repeated chords, and direct pedaling. And those are just a few examples of the things we're covering. We're covering a lot more than that, but those are just a few examples. So I'm just going to start now with a couple of the hand gym exercises, which some of you will already be familiar with. At this level, again, we're still trying to make sure that this part of the hand arch, is strong. And so what we're developing here is the intrinsic hand muscles. These also give independence of the fingers, which we really need more of at these levels. So the snapping crocodile is just this movement. It was the Nitinata it was introduced as Nitinata in Primer A. And they start by just tapping in this way, but then they start to do it with the 4th finger and the 5th finger. So again, we're really starting to focus more on those fingers. And there are other hand strengthening exercises that sort of come at different periods within the books. Another one is an exercise I call itchy leg, and this is to develop that end joint of the finger, this one here, where we often see a student collapse in this way and also collapsing in the hand, the main knuckle. This is a very easy one that students can do at any moment of the day, because all they do is they put their hand over their knee, as you can see in the picture there. I'll just bring my knee up so you can see. And then they just, at first they scratch with all the fingers. They scratch their leg. And then after a bit they can just do it with each finger. Now some students will find that very, very hard with the fourth and fifth finger, especially with their weaker hand. So it's something that you have to guide the development of it. If they're not ready, you don't do it. But once they're ready, just encourage them to just do a few little scratches the first week and then more the next week. So we've got lots of warm-ups, and here's an example of one. This is what I call circle warm-ups. Hope you can all see. You won't be able to see all the writing there. It's just an example of a page. I hope that you're able to see the slides on one side and me equally on the other side. If you can't, ask Sally, she'll tell you what to do. I think it's side-by-side speaker view, but you should all be seeing this well. So for instance, we do a lot of circles because circles really loosen up the joints. So we start with windmills, which is really loosening up the shoulder joint, and then we do circles from the elbow and then from the wrist, and circles with the thumb, for instance. So these just mean that they're and swimming exercises, wiping the table, so they just keep everything really loose before they start to practice. And then we start to move towards rounded movements at the piano. And one of the first things I do here is what I call gluey finger circles. And what we just do is put the third finger on, for instance, on the lid, or on your knee, wherever you want to do it. And all you do is move in a circle with your wrist. So you're really loosening up that wrist movement. But notice how it's not just my wrist that's moving, but my arm is following it. So the wrist is leading, but everything is following. So it's a very well coordinated movement. And then having done the warm-ups, we will then think, well, how do we put this into practice at the piano? And the way I've considered would be a very good way of doing this was by starting on white notes. Now, if you play white notes, you'll find that the wrist is a little bit lower. And when you go on to black notes, naturally the wrist tends to lift up a little bit. So if a student is doing that passage, the example that I'm showing you there, you see once they've started playing it, that circular movement automatically starts to develop. And in the left hand, it's going to be the other way around. So in the right hand, it's going to be the anti-clockwise movement, and in the left, it's a mirror image, so it's a clockwise movement. And then from that, a little bit later, we move into broken chords using a circular motion, and again we start with the white keys, so we're just doing this, and then coming back on with the F sharp, so it gives us to the black notes. And then eventually, and so on, it goes to this. Now we've got the one of the first pieces, which is an example of this technique. Or in every example, you'll see after the first 8 bars, the rotation movement moves into the right hand, but it starts in the left. And here, this is called Orbit. It's by Aaron Burroughs. It's a lovely piece, beautiful piece, very descriptive. And I'll just play you a little bit of it so you get the sense of it. And it introduces a new key signature. It introduces 5/8. So. and so on. It's a beautiful piece. It's a little bit longer than that, but I haven't got all that much time today. Developing the rounded movements a little bit further, we go into different patterns. So this is one, and then, so we're starting to use these rounded movements in lots of different patterns. And this leads on to the Gigue by Samuel Arnold, which many of you will be familiar with. It's been in various exam syllabuses. Again, I'll just play you a little bit of it, and it goes like this.
Penelope, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Gorgeous stuff. Could you tilt your computer screen just down slightly?
Yeah.
Because we're just
Not
missing
missing the top notes.
That's
okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
Super.
Okay. Good.
That should be it. Yeah. Lovely.
Okay. And now, if I were to play that without any rounded movements, it would sound like this. Now, I promise you, I am not intentionally playing unmusically there. I am just leaving out the rounded movements, which just goes to show that if we're teaching the right sort of physical gestures, the student immediately starts to get the good musical gestures as well. And so I do firmly believe that we can teach every pianist to play musically. Now, so I'm just trying to show you an example of how we're developing a particular technique through the two books here. So the rounded scales come a little bit later, and what we're doing here is again using the white notes for the scale ascending, and then coming back on the black notes. So again, we get that rounded sense of a scale. So they're really reminded that when they're practicing scales, they should be thinking of them as preparation for music, that they're a musical expression. So we're doing... And I gave these notes to Aaron Burrows and said, can you make anything of that? And he produced a wonderful piece which is using precisely those notes. So I'm going to play it for you. You'll see how beautifully he's added the harmonies to really make sense of this. Da capo as a repeat there. You can see how beautiful it is with so few notes. And so again, the same principle comes when we do one octave arpeggios. And the danger at this level is we have some students who are really quite small still, but are really at this level. So we have to be very careful when we're introducing bigger intervals. So for instance, with arpeggios, I've really introduced it in a small, so we're just doing the interval of the sixth, going up to the B, and then going to the C, and if they're big enough, we're going to the D. But the whole idea here is that, again, we're using a swiveling wrist. So we practice first, away from the piano, just having the gluey third finger, and just swiveling around it, swinging around, so that the arm and the wrist take the finger to the note, so students aren't stretching in a way which then causes the wrist to tighten up. So we're just doing. And if they can't reach the D, we leave it out. And again, there's a beautiful piece which demonstrates this, which is called As the Wind Cries. so on da capo. And then this is also developed further into 2 octaves arpeggios. So again, we're using that idea of just holding one note down and swiveling around it. But here, say we take the left hand, we're really aiming that the arm takes the thumb into position. So on the piano, we start with the 4th finger on F sharp. Just going first to the E, so they don't have to so far to go. And then when they're ready, taking the thumb all the way down to the D. So you see how we're really trying to be very careful about the progression so that everything feels confident when they do it. Now, in the right hand, some of you may be a little bit surprised initially at the fingering I'm using. So for instance, I know that most people teach that for D major, you start with the thumb on the D, and they do this. And that's been taught for a century and more. But the trouble with that is what we often see is what I call chicken wings, the elbow really moving to get the thumb under. And it's a long way to get the thumb from A to D, and it's going under a white note, which is why I changed the fingering to 2-4, and then the thumb has to only go the interval of a third, and it's going onto the black. It's much, much easier. So we can combine that with this image that I have of the stroking the cat, so we get a very smooth movement up the 2 octaves. And again, we have a piece for this which goes like this. I'm just going to play you a small section of it. Flowing it is, and so they will respond to that nature of the music by playing a beautifully expressive arpeggio. So that was just trying to give you an overview about how we're developing sideways movement, expressive gestures in lots of different sort of elements of music. But another really important aspect of these books is about listening and tone control and curiosity about sounds. So as I say, we have these dynamics explorers, the sound explorers, where they just play around with creating different sounds and maybe improvise and write something of their own. But I also think that at this stage we can be asking a little bit more of the balance between the hands, and how do we introduce that? And I think it's really important that they learn specific movements that show them how to create different qualities of sound. So for instance, what I'm using here is I'm alternating dropping onto the lap, which is a very heavy, using arm weight. So it's what we, in the earlier books, we call elephant steps, and contrasting that with just tapping lightly on the head. So you can't see my head, but there you go, you get the sense of it. So for cha-cha, we're just doing heavy, light, light. Cha, cha. Cha, cha, So that quickly leads into pieces like the Gurlitt in the Garden, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's a beautiful piece, and it's quite a simple one because the left hand is not synchronized with the right. So you're doing cha, cha. We're actually doing exactly that. So we do a few exercises leading into it, and then we come into this piece. And that's a very nice piece to be working on because, as I say, the right hand is very rarely playing at the same time as the left. And it's not until level 3 that we introduce a slightly more advanced example. For instance, also by Gurlitt, the Night Journey, because there the hands are actually playing together, but it's still the idea of one hand being really heavy and the one being very light. So that's the one that goes like this. also, by this stage, we've also introduced pianissimo playing, so that they're getting a better sense of how to balance the hands. So that one was the Gurlitt in the Garden, and then we had the Night Journey by Gurlitt. Now, another aspect of balancing the sounds and controlling the sounds is how to hold some notes with one finger and play notes with the other. So there's a few exercises where we're just learning to, say, for instance, hold the fifth down and feel that the others are really relaxed. And here, what we're aiming for is a piece by Bartók called I Danced with the Pig, which is a wonderful example for this, and it's got a great title. So what we do is start by just playing one finger, and we start away from the piano and just have that finger on the piano, and then we just move around it. So I've got my fifth finger down, and I'm just moving in all different directions in different ways, getting everything loosened up in the arm. Because what I do find is that when we have held notes, what often happens is that students press into that note, they feel they've got to grip it down, and then the wrist tightens up and everything gets very, very stiff. And the end result of that, I find, when people get to advanced level, and they're doing, some of those complicated Dochniani exercises or Pichner exercises that hold down certain fingers and play with the others, that's when they're very likely to develop pain and a lot of tension in the arms. So if we can get this right at this stage, we're giving them fantastic foundations here. So we start by just playing one note, and here I'm starting with the fifth, and then we start to introduce the other fingers. And very free, and my hand didn't feel tense at all. So this eventually, once you practiced in both hands and so on, leads into I Danced with the Pig, which is using exactly this technique. If we start by actually playing the first notes separately, it's much easier. We start with that and then just move around, and then we introduce the piece. The second half of the piece has the thumb resting while the other fingers play staccato in that way. And you see, it's a fantastic, fairly simple way to introduce contrapuntal playing within one hand. So, I've now talked about sort of rounded movements and balancing, and I want to talk a little bit about agility now. And I'm going to start with an exercise that I call tumbling fingers. We start with the idea is comparing, for instance, playing an old-fashioned typewriter and then playing a laptop. It's so much lighter, isn't it? And it's so much easier, and anybody can do that fast on a laptop. So they don't need a lot of pianistic training. So what we do is we start with what I call cloud hands. So we lift up our arms and just imagine that they're clouds in the sky. And so what's happening is that the arm weight is being taken by the shoulders here. So the hands feel quite light. And then we just say, well, let the rain trickle out of the clouds. And then we do this on our knee, or this is also what I call the Mexican wave in The Complete Pianist. So we're just twiddling fingers. And then we then turn that into a piece, just some exercises like this one. So you see they're playing semiquavers, but it's very easy. And eventually we turn this into a piece which is called tango, which uses these semiquaver passages. we've actually got lots of fun pieces in these books. And so that also leads, for instance, to the Haydn Gypsy Dance Zingarese, which goes to... And so in different places in the book, we give some revision pieces which combine several different techniques. You'll see that tango that I've just played also uses the jellyfish jumps, which we introduced in level 1. So this lightness of touch is also very helpful for playing ornaments. So for instance, with ornaments, we don't want to suddenly rush in and do... put a loud trill, a long trill, as the first time a student experiences trills. They'll panic, their hand will seize up, their wrist will tighten up, and everything will go wrong. And they'll be terrified of ornaments ever after. So we're trying to introduce them very gradually. Again, we're just doing little sort of floaty, imagining da-da-dum, da-da-dum, and then on the piano. And you see my arm is floating between them, so as I start the ornament, the hand is very relaxed. And then a little bit faster. And then rest. And then this leads into the lovely Grandmother's Minuet by Grieg, which goes like this. Now, I have to confess I've shortened it because I thought, as far as ornaments are concerned, they've learned all they need to know in those few bars. And Grieg has done a wonderful thing. He's introduced every phrase with a mordant, which means that the hand is relaxed before we actually play it, and each one is played staccato. So it's a very lovely introduction. We also introduce inverted mordants and trills. And so here we're just adding in 2 more notes. And don't forget the black notes. And then longer ones. And we've got a little piece which is called The Trickster. I'll just play a little bit of it and you can see how these are brought together. And so. And the trills are brought into the left hand, so everything is exercised equally. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about how you can use these books. So I've just shown you 3 real examples of types of technique that we can use in different ways throughout the books, but there are many other different aspects of technique that are included as well. So please do feel free to use these books flexibly. Don't feel you've got to do everything for every student in the same way. Students are different ages, they've got different personalities. Some like to learn more by rote, some want to learn, they all have different preferred learning styles. So feel free to change things. What I have heard from many teachers using the first 3 books is that these books they found them very, very useful for neurodiverse students. And one of the reasons for this is because everything's very varied. There's a lot of warm-ups which are away from the piano. You can stand up, there's singing, there's all different sorts of activities. So if a student has fairly short attention span, for instance, they should find these books very useful. Don't worry if you've got a student who's at grade 1 or grade 2 level and thinking, oh dear, do I have to go back and revise all the first 3 books? Whenever we've introduced a new technique, we've given a little bit of revision. Hopefully those of you who already understand the principles and the movements will be very easily able to introduce those new techniques to students who haven't come across my sort of approach before. And as I said before, there are extension activities. Again, you can use those as flexibly as you want as basis for improvisation, because as you will have seen, a lot of the exercises I've shown you today are very pattern-based. So they're the sort of things that students can develop in improvisation. And I think what I've shown you is that I've really tried very carefully to be very precise about how the best way to progress, and some things I've left, some elements of technique I've left a little bit later than in other books because I feel they're a little bit more challenging or hands might not be ready for them. So I have tried to write a very clear progression, but obviously there will be times when a student is learning another piece and you want there's a type of a section in that piece that uses a particular, it might use rotation or it might use repeated notes or something. And so you might want to dip into the book and just use that section. And that's also equally fine. Now, the problem we as teachers have is that, of course, parents often just want the pupil to progress very obviously. So in the UK, often when they've done an exam, say grade 1, the parent is hoping that they'll sort of immediately start working on grade 2 exam pieces. But of course, if they do that, they will really struggle with those pieces because they really haven't got the necessary skills. So any time that is spent on learning all these skills now will be saved tenfold later on. They won't have any stress, and they won't have any physical tension. They'll be having musical gestures that really fit the physical gestures that fit the music, and they're not going to develop all these sort of tensions and injuries that I see so often in student and professional pianists. So it takes a little bit longer, but if the parent can understand why we're doing this, then they'll realise the benefits, the long-term benefits, and also the pleasure that students get from not just playing exam pieces for 3 months. Because once they've learnt all these tools, they're there in the toolbox. So performance pieces, exam pieces will be learnt very quickly. For instance, in this book, I include the Clementi Sonatina. Now, a student will be able to learn that very quickly because every single bar, the technique in every single bar has already been studied. And you just say, oh, that's a down, up, hop, hop, that's a rounded movement, that's a G major scale, and so on. So they've learnt that the physical gestures are always aligned to the musical gesture. So they're always going to be playing musically because nearly always, for instance, with advanced students, if I see that something isn't sounding good and I know that they're not happy with the passage, it's very often that they're making the wrong movements, which is then pulling against, it's at odds with the actual content of the music. And if the physical gesture is in line with the musical gesture, then everything sounds great. Yes, you can use these books alongside exams if you're somebody who feels that helps your students with motivation. You can use them as standalones, or you can use them alongside method books. And I've talked about the levels already, but they are in tune with the requirements for those specific exams of the ABRSM, Trinity, and the Royal Conservatoire of Music in Canada. As I said, if you're somebody who's not using exams, there is plenty of recommended pieces and duet finales and so on that you can use to put all these examples into practice, further practice. Now, can I just make some suggestions? I'm delighted that the publisher, on both occasions, has published these books in the spring, because it does give teachers a little bit of time to prepare before some of the new students arrive in the autumn, for the autumn term. And so I really do recommend, if you're not familiar with the earlier books, if you're not familiar with this approach to teaching, that you do watch the videos and read the teacher notes as well. The teacher notes just give you a few more details about the actual nitty-gritty of each technique, so you really know what to look out for in your students. And then the more you practice these techniques and use them in your own playing, the more confidently you'll be able to express them and explain them to your students. I run an organisation called the Roskell Academy, and the administrator for this is Gwen Harbon, who is also a member of the Curious Piano Teachers Group. And we run regular training events. They're very friendly and supportive. And as it happens, we have one coming up. This is very, very short notice because it's this weekend. It's on Saturday and Sunday, May the 24th and 25th. It's in person in London, and it's also going to be live streamed, so you can join it from a distance. So if any of you happen to be at a loose end this weekend and feel like joining us, we'll be going into a lot of practical detail about how we introduce each of these techniques to our students. We'll be going through all the techniques in all the books. The first 3 books will be covered on day 1, and the second 2 on day 2. And it'll be very practical, and we'll be talking about, and advising each other. It'll be very supportive and friendly. So talking about friendliness, we also do look on our website. There are free resources. We're going to be adding quite a lot more over the next few months. And if you want to sign up on the website, you get newsletters with updates on various types of training, events and things. And if you're interested in using Facebook, we have a Roskell Academy piano group in which people ask questions. Some people like to put up videos of their pupils studying some of the pieces and exercises and so on. And it's a very supportive group. Now, Claire is here from Faber Music, but I'll just tell you about this. Faber Music have kindly offered members of this webinar 20% reduction on all the books if you order them from Faber Music Shop. Unfortunately, if you're watching from the United States or from Canada, they won't reach the US until August. They're being shipped out. But after that, you'll be able to get 20% off from the alfred.com, and you can do a pre-order, I think quite soon. I don't know if how soon that will be available. And if you're watching from elsewhere, there's a little link there which tells you all the different places where you can order books from. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you giving the time to this webinar. I don't know if any of you have any questions. If you have, please put them in the chat, and Sally will be keeping an eye out for them, and will relay any of them to me.
Fabulous, Penelope. Absolutely wonderful and inspiring. And I know there's been a lot of chat going on in the chat. And I loved this point that you made about the musical focus, that actually the pieces are chosen because of their musical focus. They're not just a technical exercise. And I just adored all the pieces you played by Aaron Burroughs. I mean, they're just superb, aren't they? Beautiful, beautiful, really gorgeous pieces of music in their own right, I feel.
And each one of them, Sally, is really focusing almost exclusively on that technique. And so what I really struggled with when I was looking for pieces for these books was that most pieces of all the traditional repertoire have a few bars of this technique, of one technique in the right and one in the left, and then something else, and then something else. Yeah. And it's very confusing for students. And so instead of playing pieces, they're learning boring studies. And that's what we wanted to replace. We wanted to give something which is really musically exciting and really expressive, but that really focused on a particular technique. I think Anne's done a fantastic job.
I would absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And the fact that all the pieces that you've chosen, you might have struggled to choose the more standard repertoire pieces, but they're all well within the capability of the students. At that particular level. So there's nothing out there that is too hard. It's all actually, the Night Journey, for example, is a lovely grade 2-ish kind of piece, and very, very achievable. Because what you don't want them to do is get stuck on stuff, do you? You want them to be able to learn something fairly straight, easily, so they can really focus on that gorgeous sound.
So you want them to have learned all the techniques first, so that when they put it into practice in a piece, it feels easy, because that's what we're aiming for, is ease. Because once the student feels at ease with the piano, then they love it, they enjoy it, and they play well, and they get the satisfaction, and they get the positive feedback from people.
Absolutely.
As well.
And that
Yeah.
really important point that you made about parents and delaying exams and putting exams, to me, they're the icing on the cake, aren't they? Take time, especially in these early years, to really establish, is what you're saying, really, really sound, expressive musical technical skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
So important for everybody. Okay, we had a couple of questions. Oh, there's 10. So Simon asked a question. I don't know whether they're questions or not, but Simon just asked, when developing the books, did you consider single-handed music at all for those with physical problems?
Okay, so in the first three books, everything, I think, certainly in the first two, every piece is learned. You play it in the right hand first, then you play it in the left. And because they all have teacher accompaniments as well, then say if somebody was only one-handed, they would be able to get a really satisfying musical experience by just playing with one hand. And actually, we introduced playing hands together much later than you experience in most method books, precisely that reason, because we wanted each hand to really have a good muscle memory of the gestures it needs to make without being compromised by the fact that the one hand is doing one thing and the other hand is doing something completely different, and then they end up just both being static. I think in level 2 and 3, again, I think what could happen in a lot of pieces is that the teacher could be playing the accompaniment, and a one-handed pianist, for instance, could be playing the other. And so, for instance, we include pieces like the Schumann. That's melody, isn't it? And that we're introducing that because we want them to sing the right and play the left hand with a very light rotation. And so we really encourage the student to play the right hand, and the teacher to play the left, and then to switch over and so on. So, I mean, this is a sort of normal way of teaching anyway, isn't it? Especially when we're trying to get different sounds. So it wasn't specifically written for that, but each hand is certainly treated independently, Simon. So I hope that there's enough there that would be of real value to any student who really is, for instance, has injured one hand, broken the wrist or something, and only practicing one hand. There should be plenty there for them. But we weren't specifically thinking of that, no.
No. Okay, hopefully that's answered that for you. Now, Heidi had to go, and I think you've actually answered her question, because she's saying she's got an adult with huge tension issues, and she's working on grade 4, and she was wondering where to start in the books, whether she had to go back to the first 3 books, or just start with these ones. And I think you sort of answered that.
Yeah, but what she might also like to know about is a year ago or so, I produced an online course which is called Foundations in Piano Technique, which is 25 lessons, which covers all the techniques of the first 3 books, but in an adult way. So what might be really useful is for her to watch that, because then she doesn't feel she's being sent back. She wouldn't think of it as going back to primer A, and then to sort of jump in and out of any sections of level 2 and 3 that the teacher thinks is particularly going to be relevant for this student. Because, for instance, if she's got very tight wrists, which it sounds as though she has, then she needs to learn about the parachute touch. And then she needs that in a basic way, but we introduce it again in levels 2 and 3. So I think she could jump in there without feeling that she's being sort of humiliated by being sent back to the bottom of the class.
Yeah, I think that's all good advice, which I think Heidi will find useful. Lots and lots of lovely comments. Lots of thanks to you, Penelope, for this. Marianne is saying she likes that everything is so fully gesture based, and playing musically is a much more natural way. And so she's going to be getting the books. Melvin's there as well, saying he's using them with adult students. Thank you, Melvin, for that.
Can I just say something in connection to the second to last comment? Marianne, I think you said her name was.
Yes.
What we've done in quite a lot of the techniques, when I was showing the rounded movements, we always exaggerate them at first. So they're quite big movements and quite rounded circles. But then obviously once it gets a bit faster and once they sort of have learnt it, they stop thinking about it. They don't need to think about these gestures ever again because they're built into our muscle memory and they become much more discrete. So gradually that jig by Arnold the movement is there, but it's been minimized. It's what Mate called the invisible in piano playing. It's all there. The freedom is there,
Yes.
but it's in a more discrete type of movement. But the gesture is still the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I hope that just goes a little bit further with that for you, Marianne. I think at the moment that is just about. Yep. She says thank you, and Heidi actually is still there, and she says thank you. That she really liked your suggestion there. I think that's about it in terms of the questions. Gwen has been. Thank you, Gwen, for sharing the various links, and Claire has also been sharing the various links. So I think if there's no other things coming out, Lisa is just saying, lovely way to finish this. She's seeing positive results with her students using the first 3 books, and she can't wait to start using the next.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. Thank you so much, both Claire and Sally, for inviting me to do this. I mean, there are such, close links between our various groups, between the Roskell Academy, the Curious Piano Teachers, the Faber. Faber is, by the way, the publisher of the book. I hope that was obvious to everybody. Through Edition Peters, it's Faber. It's a combination. I think we're really paving the way with a good ethos and good principles and good research into piano playing. And I think I love to see the teachers who are really curious and are really just learning and developing, step by step, month by month, year by year. It gives me real joy to see that. And so thank you very much for allowing me to share this with you.
That's absolutely our pleasure, Penelope. And that's why this month is called Stronger Together, because that's exactly how we feel. If we're all together, we can actually move forward into a piano playing future that is bright and healthy and musical. And, for teachers to come along with us on that journey and to take over, because we've got to have the generation coming through as well. So thank you all so much who've come, and those of you that have sat and listened as well, or are watching this on catch up. Curious Piano Teachers currently have a discount on. I will email it through to everybody as part of the webinar replay, which will be available shortly on YouTube. So I think it's just up to me to say thank you to everybody for coming. Thank you to Penelope for writing the books and actually taking the time to get all this out of your head, this wonderful stuff, because I know that it takes time and slight sense of, can I do this? And you have, and it's wonderful. And of course, we all want to know what's next, Penelope. What are you going on further?
Well, there has been an initial discussion because at the moment everybody feels that a complete pianist is sort of from grade 7, grade 8 up right through till sort of music college and professional. It's an advanced book.
Yeah.
And a lot of pianists sort of below that level have been trying to sort of learn from that book, and it can be a bit overwhelming. So we've sort of filled up the gaps from grade 1 to grade 4. So what you can see there is a nice little gap in the middle, which we hope to fill at some point in the not too distant future. But it's going to take me a lot of time to get my head out of what we've been doing so far and into the next levels.
Indeed, and you need a bit of a break in the meantime.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just say thank you once again. Claire, did you want to say anything to finish?
Just thank you to you, Sally, as well, for leading us through the session, and thanks to Penelope for sharing all of your wisdom today. And just to reiterate that if you haven't entered the prize draw, now is your last chance to do it. and also that the discount code, the information has been posted in the chat, or you can go to Penelope's website. She's got all the links up there as well. If you would like to buy the books, you just need to enter that code at the checkout on the Favour Music store. And there's other ways of buying them if you're in different territories, which are listed there. But yeah, I think that's all from me otherwise. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for joining us today.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.